Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. I hope everybody is ready for the weekend. There were a few big games that just released today, including the Callisto Protocol and also Marvel's Midnight Suns. So if you picked up one of those, hope you have a great, fantastic time. However, we do have plenty to get into today. The Activision Blizzard news continues to churn as Microsoft and Sony are trying to hash out their problems. Then we also have the Zelda director working on an absolutely stunning PlayStation game. You're definitely going to want to see this one yourself. And then also on top of that, Hideo Kojima might be teasing his next game, which, I mean, the timing of this is awfully suspicious, to say the least. Yeah, there's a lot to get into today, so might as well just go and jump right into it. And you know what? Let's go and start off with the Callisto Protocol. There's been a ton of hype leading up to the release of this game, and it is now officially out today. It is a new horror IP coming from the Dead Space creator, Glenn Schofield, and from a visual standpoint, it looks terrifyingly atmospheric and just downright brutal. Well, reviews are starting to roll out today alongside its release, so if you were waiting for those reviews to decide on whether or not you want to play it, it does currently sit at a 75 overall score on Metacritic as of this recording. So the score itself is a little lower than what a lot of us anticipated. I did put a poll up earlier this week, and the overwhelming majority did predict it would be in the 80 to 90 range, myself included. Actually, only 17% of you got this one correct, so congrats to those that did predict its score correctly. Clearly, you all can see the future here. But going back to the reviews, from what I've seen, the Callisto Protocol is quite divisive, and a lot of that seems to come down to its combat specifically. Apparently, this is a very challenging game, so kind of keep that in mind, but when you combine that with its dodge mechanic, which you use in its combat, not everybody seemed to necessarily enjoy that aspect. It's apparently very unique in how it's incorporated, and some described it as even frustrating. So that seems to be where it's a little bit more on the divisive side of things. Some people, however, they absolutely loved it, and then others just became frustrated. Now, the other common complaint that I saw, and I really disagree with this one, is that it's too similar to Dead Space, but with prettier graphics. I don't really like this quote-unquote critique at all. I thought that was exactly what we wanted. I mean, we always knew that this was meant to be a Dead Space spiritual successor, and that was one of the main reasons that it was so hyped up in the first place. I mean, I don't know. This complaint doesn't really hit home with me personally, but each to their own, I guess. All in all, though, it's up to you and whether or not it sounds like a game that you would be interested in. Next up, we do have the Game Awards next week, but it wouldn't quite be a Jeff Keighley showcase without some type of Hideo Kojima speculation. The two are very good friends, as we all know, and more often than not, Hideo Kojima does tend to show up at his showcases in some shape or form. Well, interestingly enough, just 1 week before the Game Awards airs, Kojima decided to post this up on Twitter. It reads, "Start a new journey," and then below that you have 3 mysterious logos. So if anything, it does seem like he's teasing a new game here, and this only adds to some of his recent tweets. Throughout the last few months, he's confirmed that Elle Fanning and Shioli Kutsana will play an acting role in one of his future games. Now, that's kind of the thing though, because it is believed that Kojima Studios has at least 2 different projects in development that we currently know about. One is an Xbox game that's actually already been confirmed. They are in a partnership together, but that's presumed to be a new creative horror game by the name of Overdose. That actually did leak out online, footage and all. Then the other one that's widely believed to be in development is Death Stranding 2, as Norman Reedus, the actor of the protagonist in that game, suggests, or pretty much flat out said, it is in development. So really the question then becomes, what is Kojima teasing here? Is this related to that Xbox game, Overdose, if that's something different, or instead is it Death Stranding 2? Now I will say, based on some of the pictures that we've seen so far, and really even with the logos here, there does seem to be a resemblance in Death Stranding's art style. It also has been pointed out that these logos do seem kind of similar to Death Stranding's Bridges logo, though at the same time, to be fair here, you can really kind of say the same about the Kojima Studio logo. It does kind of share that art style as well. So there's really no guarantee on what this is related to, but either way, I mean, this is still Kojima, and that's really just all the more reason to tune in for the Game Awards. It does look like it's possible that Kojima has something to show there. Let's go and talk about the ongoing Activision Blizzard situation again, though, as Sony and Microsoft continues to fight it out in the public eye to curry favor with these different regulators. Now, this topic does piggyback off of some of the other topics that we've gone over the last few weeks, though there is a good sign here from Microsoft as well, which I'll get to here in just a second. But first, it is increasingly looking like there will be concessions made in some of these bigger markets. Earlier this week, it was reported that Microsoft plans to offer a 10-year licensing agreement to Sony. That way, they can appease the EU regulators. Well, it now appears something very similar is happening with the FTC over in the United States. This was reported by Seeking Alpha, which posted a report saying this. The FTC is then expected to make a decision in January, according to a Deal Reporter item, which cited sources familiar. Microsoft is said to be working to give assurances to Sony that it will allow Activision's games to be played on the PlayStation console, and held meetings to discuss terms with Sony over the weekend. So they are saying that Microsoft and Sony had a meeting to figure out if they can reach some type of agreement, which really lines up with everything that we've heard here in recent weeks. Microsoft is more than willing to offer concessions to speed up this buyout, which honestly, that's really in their best interest. They want this deal to go through as fast as it possibly can and with as little friction as it can. That's very important here. A buyout of this size certainly puts a lot of their plans on hold until they can get this acquisition through regulations. So it is in their own best interest to work with regulators and avoid any type of extended legal arguments, even if they would likely win, which I do believe that they would. Now, with them meeting Sony, though, just kind of hearing their back and forth so far, I am kind of curious if Sony is actually willing to play ball. As was previously reported, Microsoft has already offered them a 10-year licensing contract, which that definitely seems generous, but we do also know that Sony previously declined to comment on that contract. And that's where I do kind of wonder, will Sony be reasonable in these meetings? I do believe a lot of their complaints are simply to block the deal rather than actual genuine concern that Call of Duty will no longer be available on their console. I do believe Sony knows for a fact that Microsoft intends to keep Call of Duty multi-platform, which is why a lot of Sony's arguments comes off as a little disingenuous. At the end of the day, though, it's not really up to Sony per se, as long as Microsoft and these regulators can come to some type of an agreement. However, if Sony and Microsoft does indeed come to an agreement, though, then really the rest for Microsoft should be much easier, if anything else. The good news for Microsoft here, though, is that Wedbush added Activision to its best ideas list, saying that it's highly likely that the deal with Microsoft is completed within the next 6 months. Wedbush analyst Michael Pachter said this about the looming buyout. Microsoft is likely to make formal guarantees around the availability of Activision content, such as making Call of Duty available on Sony's PlayStation for the next decade. He then continues on to say that we think the regulatory challenges in the US, the UK, and the EU are unlikely to materialize in a formal manner, and even less likely to succeed if they do. Now, this is something that we have talked a lot about in the past. Ultimately, some concessions might be made, and actually it does appear that will be the case, at least in regards to Call of Duty. Now, we'll see about other things, but ultimately I don't think that these regulators want to go to court. I don't think that they have a great case to work with. Yes, this is a big acquisition, and they might not necessarily like that, but they still have to play by the rules. I think Microsoft has some good, sound arguments that would really play in the hands of a legal argument. So really, at the end of the day, I think it's in the best interest for everybody involved to work together and get this acquisition done. Regardless, though, it does sound like we will hear more official news here in the coming months, maybe for January. So do keep that in mind, and I will update you all as soon as we find out. Moving on, though, a former Zelda director, Kentaro Tominaga, which just recently directed the Zelda Breath of the Wild expansion, has now joined a Chinese studio by the name of Paper Games to work on a brand new open-world fantasy RPG, Nikki Infinity. Now, this is something that we are starting to see a little bit more of as of recent. Some of these highly talented Japanese developers are moving over to Chinese studios, but this one is specifically very interesting, not just because this is coming from a former Zelda director, but also they've already shown a pretty lengthy trailer, and I mean, this game looks absolutely gorgeous. Now, I have seen some people compare it to a mix of Zelda and Disney, and that does kind of seem to fit here, but the visuals are stunningly, absolutely stunningly impressive. The thing about all that, though, is that it goes beyond just that, though, because it also looks like it could be an actual good game. It does look to combine platforming, magic, and puzzles in an open world style of game, but what's really unique about Nikki Infinity is that the protagonist has some type of dress-up ability where she can change her costume on the fly that then changes the powers that she can use. In the trailer, we see a number of different costumes and ideas that ranges from her turning miniature, you see her turn giant, to something that allows her to glide, and of course, because why not, you also have a fishing costume, so you can then sit down and relax. It does sound like a neat idea on paper, though, that could be a lot of fun. And when you combine that with just its stunning visuals and also a director that's worked on Zelda, I mean, we know that he can make good games. Yeah, I'd say that this looks like an exciting release worth paying attention to. Now, with that said, there's currently no release date information as of this moment, but they, however, did confirm that it's coming over to PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and even mobile devices. Sony, however, they definitely seem to be getting some of these Chinese studios on board, and I think what they're doing here is very smart. We already saw it with Genshin Impact. That turned out to be a great game, but there's also some very promising games coming from that region in the future, and that now also has to include Nikki Infinity. This one definitely looks like it has a lot of potential. Now, speaking of PlayStation, one last thing I want to go over just real quick is that they're quietly getting one of the best games that's released this year, later this month, being Neon White. Now, if you don't know what this game is, you definitely need to know, because Neon White is an indie darling that released on the Nintendo Switch and PC just earlier this year, and it remains one of the highest rated releases for 2022 with a 90 overall score on Metacritic. In fact, it is up for some awards at the Game Awards next week, and the reason I point that out is because you absolutely should not be sleeping on this game. The way this game works, though, is that it is a speedrunning first-person shooter where you use platforming and a card-based system to navigate each level as fast as you possibly can. It's a little bit of a weird and strange game, but it's also an insanely fun game that's now headed over to the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5 on December 13th. I mean, if anything, if you're looking for a game to play this holiday, definitely keep Neon White in mind. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, now that Monster Hunter Rise is coming over to Xbox and PlayStation, do you intend on playing it? We did talk about this a few days back, but it has now since been confirmed. Monster Hunter Rise is coming over to PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, the Xbox One, and the Xbox Series on January 20th of next year. And yes, this does include Xbox Game Pass. You absolutely just gotta love it. January, honestly, for Xbox Game Pass is already killing. I mean, we're talking about Persona 3, Persona 4, and Monster Hunter Rise all starting off 2023. That's a great, fantastic way to start off the year. But nonetheless, with this being a port for a popular Nintendo Switch and PC game, I wanted to see how many of you all are actually interested. And as you can see here, most of you all absolutely are interested in this, with 45% of you saying yes for the first time, 8% yes, you're going to actually replay it, and then 40% of you said no. So that means 53% of you all are looking to play Monster Hunter Rise on PlayStation or Xbox. And that kind of shows you just how many people have been missing out on this game since it was exclusive to Nintendo and PC. You have to remember that Monster Hunter World was insanely successful on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It did sell 18.5 million units, of course, including PC as well. Monster Hunter Rise, though, it's already sold 11 million units, and with it coming over to Xbox and PlayStation now, it'll be interesting to see if that number can eventually pass Monster Hunter World. With it coming to Xbox Game Pass Day 1, though, this is also an opportunity for Capcom to gain even more fans before they eventually put out the next big Monster Hunter game that's completely built with these next-generation consoles in mind. That is something that I noticed in the comments, actually. I did see some of you all mention that you would at least try Monster Hunter Rise with the addition of Xbox Game Pass. Matt Wimberly said here that I was never able to get into Monster Hunter World, and I don't think I'll be able to with Rise, but I'm still going to give it a whirl because of Game Pass. So that's actually one of the great things about Xbox Game Pass. You can just go out, try it yourself, and kind of see what happens. As for Monster Hunter Rise, though, since it was confirmed, I'll just go ahead and kind of leave you all with some now confirmed information. Just as it was previously rumored, yes, it will release on January 20th. It will include 4K 60 frames on the Xbox Series and the PlayStation 5. You can actually also run at 120 1080p as well. There won't be crossplay or cross saves. That's a little unfortunate, but the Sunbreak expansion is slated to release in spring of 2023. So there you have it. It is official. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you like the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.